Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome back to Warno. Today for our basics video I want to talk about commands. Now, commands can be vehicles, infantry, tanks, helicopters, pretty much a bit of everything except planes, because that would be crazy. Unless they add VTOL aircraft, then it might kind of make sense. But the point is quite simple. They are very similar to what we had in Wargame. They're a little bit different to what you got in SD2 because commands here are principally used for capping points. The control zones around the map that give you points so that you can either buy units in the case of destruction or control points that win you the game if you are playing the conquest mode. But obviously we can take a look at these in a little bit more detail by actually going into the deck building. There is a slight difference between commands in Wargame and Warno, and early in Warno's development they were pretty much the same. A command moved into a point, and if it moved out of the point you no longer had control of the point. However, they have changed that later in the development cycle, so it is now the case that in Warno, if your commander caps a point and leaves that point, you are still in control of that point until it is taken over by an enemy commander. So commanders are still used to contest points, so you and the enemy can have a commander in the same point and you are contesting it. However, you no longer have to leave a commander in your rear points. One of the reasons for this obviously was to stop excessive sniping of commands that were at rear points. So they kind of changed it up a little bit. And it hasn't honestly made that much difference to gameplay, because there's still the potential that you could swing around the back and steal the enemy points if you wished with a fast moving command or a commander in a chopper, be that infantry or a helo commander itself. But it's just changed things up a little bit. The other thing that is different about commanders compared to Wargame, but is something that has been brought in from Steel Division 2, is the fact that now commanders have an aura around them. And that aura will buff any other units around them to the next veterancy level. So if you bring them in at trained, they will go up to veteran. If you bring them in at veteran, they will go up to elite. They can't go any higher than that, but you get the idea. They will also be flagged as such, and that will be noticeable on the little unit card that appears, or the little icon that appears above the unit. We'll have a look at that in game. But first, let's actually take a look at the deck and see where these are. I'm just going to create an American 3rd Armored because I know they have a bit of everything. So, if you're from Wargame Red Dragon or the Wargame series, then you'll be used to all of your commanders being in your logistics tab. That is still true for some commanders, but not all. Here you will find your helo commanders, such as the UH-60 here. And you will also find your jeeps, your lightly armoured vehicles, and your infantry fighting vehicle commanders, for the most part. When it comes to infantry commanders, they are now located on the infantry tab, such as the fire team leader or the engineers leader here. And then if you want your tank commanders, they are located on the tank tab. This means that logistics is kind of more focused on supply and some commands, but then if you want a command that can take some punishment or a command that can hide in buildings, you're having to take them elsewhere. Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just means it's a little bit more spread out. And it makes you think a bit more carefully about which ones you're taking, perhaps. But I digress. Let us have a look at how they actually perform in game. So, welcome to the battle map. I've just put down a few units, there's no enemy here, just so I can demonstrate how the commands work without us having to worry about anything else going on. So the first thing is I've put a couple of troops down here and brought a tank in, and you'll notice all of these troops are veterancy rank 2. They have the 2 chevrons against their little icon there, and you can see it down here in the name as well on the little card at the bottom. If I select the commander, do you see it has this little ring around it in little dots? If you zoom out, you can't really see it at all, but once you zoom in, it does become visible. If we drive this over towards those units, as it gets within range, we will see those units rank up to the next veterancy level, which is elite. This obviously gives them various bonuses, basically the exact same bonuses they would get if you brought them in as elite to start with. And there you go, you can see that that little icon is appearing next to them, and that is to signify that a commander is within range and buffing them. Now bear in mind that this is a temporary bonus. If we move the commander away again, they will lose this buff. Now obviously on the front lines, it's going to be very risky to be bringing in a little jeep like this one to try and buff your units, and this is where command tanks really come in. A command tank is basically like any other tank. It will have tank armor, tank armament, and can take a bit of punishment. Not to say it won't be targeted down by the enemy, because it certainly will. As soon as it is spotted, they will start gunning for it. However, it can obviously be kept closest to the front lines and potentially buff other tanks and troops without putting itself at quite as much risk as perhaps this little jeep would. For example, if the enemy artillery in area, yes, they'll do it damage, but hopefully they won't get lucky and kill it, whereas one or two decent shots near this may kill it in one go. While that command comes in, let's move this one up to this point. Now, the thing to mention about commands is they don't have to be stood still in a point to cap it. They can be on the move. Obviously, the exception being if it's an infantry commander, it has to be outside of its vehicle. It will not cap if it is in a vehicle. But this command, I'm just going to drive it straight through here and it will cap this point. Now there's two things I want you to notice is first that it does cap it, but I want you to notice where the cap seems to start from and also the time it takes. The reason for this is that if you are driving through a point, your vehicle needs to be in that point long enough to complete the cap. Now here it won't be an issue, but say you were going through the corner of a point, you see that? It takes a few seconds. If you're going through the corner of a point, you might not be in long enough for that to happen, so keep that in mind. The other thing to note was that as the command moved in, the sort of control zone moved out from that command, and that will happen wherever the command goes in. And the enemy can see that. So if I move this one up here and move it into a completely different part, you will notice the command or the control point, the control zone will spread out from this area. And that gives the enemy a really good indicator of where your command is, at least roughly. And you can expect often a quick response from artillery or a bomber to try and take that out. So one of the most important things you can do is if you are planning to leave your command in that point, and you're able to, once it's in, move it. You see that spread out? I'm now going to right click and just get my command to move out of the way. So it's no longer in there. Now bear in mind that where you're moving it to might be just as risky, so maybe we move it back here instead. Because up there it's very near the edge of the forest. There's also the option of infantry commanders, in choppers for example here, if I move this guy over this way. Infantry commanders are handy because they're very good in forests, they're harder to see, they're also very good that they can hide in buildings like any other infantry. So they have some big advantages. Whereas a tank can't really hide in a building, you can hide it between buildings, but it's going to be easily killed by infantry. The same in a forest. Infantry are going to easily sneak up on a tank and kill it. So infantry commanders do have advantages. They're also quite mobile, and they're good for getting perhaps round behind enemy lines, taking one of their points, hiding them in buildings or a forest in that point, and just making themselves a general nuisance. Now, they won't cap because they're in a chopper. I will have to get this in and land it. Now, as with any other commander, when I land this and unload them at that point, the command will spread out from that point. The control will spread out from the point that they come out of that chopper. So that's something else to bear in mind. Again, I will be giving away that either this is a chopper commander or it's an infantry commander, if the enemy is paying close attention. So there we go, it's spreading out from that point. So they now know that either I have a chopper in here or an infantry commander, because a vehicle command can't do that, because it starts capping immediately as it goes in the point. But we can move our command anyway and hide it in a building over here. But the big changes really are that the commands no longer have to stay in the point, and you will keep it. But if the enemy comes along, they will take it off me. And otherwise, it's exactly the same as it was in Wargame Red Dragon. If a command is moved in here from the enemy, they will capture half of it and I will have half of it, and then we will have a fight over it. Now, where that line appears can sometimes indicate where the enemy commander is. So that's something else to be aware of. If it's not being buggy at all and it's behaving itself, then, you know, they bring one in here, I've got one in here, the line is going to be somewhere here, signifying that it's very likely their command is in there and mine is over this side. So you've got to sort of bear that in mind when it comes to what your enemy is thinking and what you need to be thinking, because you want to kill their command and they want to kill yours. So you'll see some people actually have two commands in one front point to really throw off the enemy, because then they won't know which command is where, and also they might know where the first one was but have no idea there's a second one in there. So it can add to the confusion and sort of the misdirection of the battle. But that is commands in a nutshell. Let's have a quick look at a replay that I did against the AI earlier, just so I can show you the contesting part of that. So, welcome to this little bit of a replay. Please excuse the battle going on in the background. It's kind of just has to be going on for me to demonstrate this. But I have a command tank down here that is coming in to this corner of this point, and you will note that the enemy has their own commander sat back here in the forest, an infantry commander. Now, when I move my command in here, it's going to be really obvious I've moved it in this corner. If I was against a human player, imagine that that artillery piece will immediately be switched to target this corner, along with any other artillery and potentially various bombers. Most players will gun for your command with whatever they can. They will push up any vehicles, infantry and anything else, because if they don't, they will lose the game. This is a game of killing enemy commanders when you're on the front lines, because that's how you win. That's how you get the victory points at the side here, and the aim is to get to 2000, or indeed destroy all your enemies' commanders, because if you have no commanders left, you can no longer contest points and you can no longer capture points. So if I keep all three of these points and kill all of my enemies' commanders, I've won the game anyway, because they can't take those points off me. They're mine. Even if they kill all my commanders, they can't take them off me. I've already won on points. So something to bear in mind. Don't just bring one set of commanders, because they will be targeted down. And once you're out of them, you're out of them. But let's hit play. And we'll watch this drive in, and we'll see the spread of that control as we have previously in this video. And there we go. You see it spreading out, it's a little bit slower, and that is us neutralizing that point. And then it all kind of settles. And I'm going to pause it again there. So our command has obviously come in this corner. That is going to be really obvious to the enemy. Now, the other thing that's really obvious to me is that the enemy's commander is somewhere in this area of the point. Could be in one of the buildings, perhaps. Over here. Or is back in that corner. But look at where this line is. That gives a really good indication of where their commander likely is. And we'll let this play out, because the AI being, I don't know, the AI I suppose, you could accuse it of being sensible. Perhaps it realizes I've got a lot of units. It's going to run its commander out of the point. Maybe it wants to bring it in at another point. But you'll see that I then cap this point and take complete control of it. And there it goes. It's now mine. Now, one could argue that that's actually a sensible thing to do, because as a human player, I would now, if I had some artillery in or some jets, I could just lay waste to that corner and hope I kill a commander. And the chances are I may hit it and I may kill it. Equally, I would expect the same from the enemy to be hitting this corner because they will want to kill my command. Now, at this point, I didn't know what kind of command they had. They may not know what kind of command I had. But people will do whatever they can to kill commands. I've even seen people bring in a HE bomber, a cluster bomber, and use artillery on corners of points to kill commands. So they will throw everything at it to guarantee a kill. Sometimes, in this situation, for example, when the enemy has moved their command out, or I think I've killed it, or whatever might have happened, you could actually now move your commander out. So I could move that tank out of the point. Where's the command tank? There he is. I could move that out the point, and I'd still control it. But I could move it to a safe distance and leave it at a safe distance until the enemy moved their commander back in. And then I could go in and contest it again. The idea being that I just want to stay ahead in points. It doesn't matter if they cap it briefly, as long as I stay ahead in points, because to win the game, I need to have more points. And I think when it's a 2,000 point game by default, you have to have over 100 points more to win the game. Otherwise, it's considered a draw. But either way, I want to get as many points as possible, and you have to work out little ways to do that. And this is a basics video, and I'm keeping it as simple as possible, but moving your command in and out is an option. Being sneaky and getting a command round the back of the map, such as a helo commander or an infantry commander, to cap the enemy's rear point, also a good idea. Not all people will leave a commander in their back points, like I haven't here. So someone could get a command in there and take it off me, and then I'd have to find that command, kill it, and take the point back. In the meantime, maybe they've moved their command and gone over here, and are contesting Echo now, and I have to move a command back to Delta or buy a new one to cap it back. It's variable. Some people will even defend those back points, but lots of things to bear in mind. I'm sure there's some wonderful and weird things that you can think of doing with commanders. But that is the end of this basics video. Keeping it short and sweet, but thank you very much for watching. Please do like, share, and subscribe. Have fun in Warno, everyone.